All right. Hey everyone, I'm Clemens Westrup. I'm head of data science at Sanoma, and my background is in machine learning and service design.
Yeah, and I'm Katharina. I can hear myself, guys. Okay. So I'm a doctoral candidate in the Tokyo School of Economics, and I combine there the views of business and my background in service design. And together with Clemens, we are exploring the dark matter of organizational change and digital transformation at Sanoma at the intersection of service design and data science. Yeah, and to start off, we begin with a small quote from the Data-Driven Design Day homepage 2020. We are here at the conference to hear inspiring stories how to develop products and services based on data in order to enhance customer experience and business. In other words, data should be at the very heart of an organization, which again requires a transformation within the company. And we are here to share our perception about Sanoma's journey towards a digital organization, what we have perceived.
But before we go all the way into that topic, let me give you some context. So a couple of words about Sanoma Media Finland. It's the biggest commercial media company in Finland. Quite a long legacy. And we are #1 in news, so you might know Helsingin Sanomat if you're a Finn, or Ilta Sanomat, and recently we also acquired the regional newspapers from Alma Media, for example, Aamulehti. We are also doing magazines. Aku Anka might be familiar to you. Then we're quite big in audio as well, so there's a lot of radio stations that you might be familiar with. Radio Suomi Pop, Radio Rock, a couple others. We have festival business, we have labels, and lastly also podcast audio book app that was recently introduced called Supla. And we're also pretty big in the television business, so Netherlands Media might be familiar to you with shows like The Voice of Finland and Big Brother Suomi. And we also have a digital streaming platform called Ruutu. So what that actually means in practice is that we basically reach all the Finns on a weekly basis. So that's quite a scale and actually quite unique even on international scale. And we want to be customer first in the hybrid era. So being a traditional company with a long legacy in our products, we of course come from print newspapers, linear TV, classic, radio before the digital age. But obviously, we've been from the beginning at the forefront of this digital transformation because we wanted to, but also because we had to. And happily, I can say that we made this jump into the digital era. So nowadays, more than half of our revenue comes actually from the digital services. But of course, we also have to be aware that we will be in this hybrid era for a long time because customers still want print, and that's not going to go away. And we want to, of course, focus on that while also preparing for the future and bringing new digital streams of services into our portfolio. And what that really means is that we need to transform constantly. So basically, digital transformation has been really becoming a part of our daily work, of our journey. And data is at the very heart of this transformation. So on the one hand, of course, we need to design products with, based on data, as we all know. So in the sense of design, so really user data, but also in the sense of understanding from a quantitative point of view how our products are used. But then also the matter of data itself gives completely new possibilities for building business models. So it's also that we need to understand how data works and what you can do with data. So if you think about, this is very bright here. I don't know if you can see it hopefully on the screen, but this says software. So we're still in the middle of experiencing the major disruptions coming from the age of software at the moment. And many say we're still in the middle of it. And obviously that has impacted us quite a bit. But if you now take into account artificial intelligence, which is obviously quite the hype at the moment, but it is true that major shifts of business models will still come. So if you think about, might be a bit of an overstatement, but I like it's quite on point. So Andrew Ng, who's quite a famous figure in the AI world, he said, AI is the new electricity. It will transform every industry and create huge economic value. And some might say it's an overstatement, but if you think about the field of media, take, for example, robot journalism or fake news, or there's a lot of recent things that are ongoing that we need to really be on top of. So we need to also live and breathe AI and not only software. So what that means for us, and this is where this came from, is that data should really be at the heart of the whole value creation process. So you cannot just create data somewhere in a corner and have like a nice unit that plays around. But as building software, or even more so with artificial intelligence, it's a creative problem-solving process. So everybody needs to be involved. We need all the expertise from all the parts of the company. We can't. It's not an assembly line. We're not in the age of Taylorism. So that also means that thinking data first needs a cultural transformation from within, because building up a software stack, a digital stack of products, to some extent actually could be done in parallel. Like we had the print products, and we had the opportunity to at the same time, try building our first apps, seeing like slowly testing with users, seeing how they adapt, then kind of building up the capabilities and kind of getting more and more users into them. So to some extent, of course, that was happening or could happen in parallel. But if you now think about how data transforms products really from within, like really at the core, being at the core of the offering, you need to think differently. You need to think what data is able to solve, and that requires new competencies that you need to scale within the organization, because again, it doesn't scale if it's just one unit doing it somewhere in a corner.
Yeah, so as Clemens said, thinking data first needs its own transformation within the company. But why is that actually so hard? Well, let's have a look behind the scenes of Sanoma, and here we see an abstract visualization how the organizational scheme of Sanoma is built up. So we have different units which support each other in order to create, on the one hand, top-notch journalism and entertainment content for the end user, and on the other hand, ad sales and subscription sales in order to grow business. And everything is underpinned by data. So data is at the very fundament supposed to support all these functions. But in reality, it might look a bit more like that. It's a network of different units, and the units work independently within their own unit, and they are somewhat connected at some touch points. And also data has their own unit, where there are again subunits of different data specializations. So data would be definitely here, right? But data is also within the units. And data is also flowing and connecting between the units. And in order to understand the customer, you need to connect that data. And the reality is at least as messy as this visualization. So how to streamline the data in order to understand how to create meaningful customer experience is a grand challenge. And another grand challenge is the intersubjective understandings of what is data. So for a data scientist, data is a completely different world than for a business person. So how to mediate between all these different aspects in the company. The reality is also closely connected to that, another bottleneck, language. So biz people speak biz, tech people speak tech, and editors speak content, designers speak design, and strategists speak strategy. And in the worst case, the same word has a different meaning in a different unit. This is tightly connected to granularity. If I'm at the strategy level, I might don't care too much about the ticketing system of the IT bugs in order to solve them. And if I'm working on the operational level, I might not always have the strategic goals of the year in mind when making my decisions. And this entire messy reality has also a bottleneck of ownership. Who owns this reality? Who owns this complexity? Who owns the problem? Who solves the problem? And who orchestrates these issues? So back to our quest. Thinking data first needs its own cultural transformation within the company. And how would you go about that? Well, on a very idealistic level and in our core assumption, we say you need to immerse yourself within the specific use case you're looking at. That means if there is a specific service, not only the editor must have a look at this use case, but simultaneously working together and collaborate with tech experts and other disciplines involved. But as we have also learned in the bottlenecks before, this is hard to accomplish. And this sounds for us like a real job for service design. So we see service design not only as an approach to serve the end customer, but we also see service design to find a common language within the company. Not only map out the different stakeholders who will be your customers and end users, but also map out the stakeholders within the company. What are their relations? How do they communicate with each other? What is their value proposition within the company? Again, it's two different layers to look at that. And here we would also like to remind that you can see service design on different layers. You can see it as a toolbox, different design methods and human-centered design methods in order to cope with the user research phase or to cope with the prototyping. You can also see it on a broader picture as a process. There are different approaches out there, but principally it's delving into the problem, iterating, zooming out and zooming in. But you can also see it on a meta level as a mindset, being native in interdisciplinary collaboration and being native in owning the problem, being native in adaptive reasoning and iterating. And as you can imagine, especially the mindset is a tough cookie to crack.
So how do you actually go about that? How do you now use service design to enable that data transformation within the company? Not an easy question, but this is our way that we approach this problem. So we think of it as an interplay between both directed interventions and new ways of working. So what we mean by that is that you need stimulations, you need sort of local interventions that, for example, introduce new tools, introduce, let's say, data scientists to, what does service design actually mean? What is ideation? What is prototyping? Why do you do that? So very local punctual interventions. But they don't really lead to change in the long run. So you need sort of new ways of working. You need to work on the emerging practices. And basically those then really bring about the change. So that's like slowly introducing new ways, new waves of working. So this sounds a bit abstract. That's why we're going to talk you through 2 examples of these. So the first one is a very good kind of example of this culture and these punctual interventions. So hackathon days have been around in Sanoma for a while, essentially starting from just, there's different types of hackathons, but in this case, the data science team was just, trying to have a fun day and learn new stuff. But eventually we thought that, hey, maybe we should bring in the other stakeholders. Maybe we should make this interdisciplinary. Maybe we should also involve actually the business stakeholders, and we challenge them to give us challenges from their future scenario backlogs. So this sort of became, at the same time, still a fun challenge, but at the other hand, also like a test bed for trying new methods, for learning, for example, to use this compressed service design process over a day. And in the end, sort of coincidentally, that wasn't really the purpose, but those things actually became real. So the outcomes, some of these things that were built, actually made it into products. So a good example is the diamond wall prediction for HS. So we have these diamond articles that those are kind of the ones that you pay for as a premium user. And yeah, we thought, why don't we use AI to actually assist the editors to choose which articles might make good diamond articles, because that just makes sense from a data science point of view. And yeah, that's actually now in daily use. So, and it was just starting as a hackathon challenge. So things actually got real, which is nice. It was more, in the first place, about the learning experience. But the thing was now that from these hackathon days, people would come out and they would be like, "Oh man, this was like the best thing ever." But you know, it's so disconnected. Like when we now go back to our daily life, how do we like use these things in the daily practices, in the daily routines? So that's exactly where these emerging new practices come in. Because in order to really bring the change about, you also need to change the ways that you work in your daily routines. And a good example of that is that we regularly talk about competencies, almost taking a service design approach with the other units that we're collaborating with. And sort of as an icebreaker, but we're basically using competencies as a proxy for talking about the future, how we should organize ourselves. Because then you're not on this operational level of like, oh, these are the challenges with the data that we're having right now, but it's more, okay, how should the future look? How should we, as a data team, collaborate with you as a product unit or content unit or whoever we're working with? But also, what are the competencies in those units? Like, what does a journalist need to know about data to operate in that future? And what actually, well, basically a concrete transformation really came out of this already over the years. So we started as this central data unit, like center of excellence approach introduced to like make a big change. And that was probably needed at that time. But over the years, as sort of the company matured and became more fluent in speaking data, we changed the approach, basically based on this feedback in these conversations. And we brought the people back into the units and really integrated them into the product backlog in those product units. So instead of like having the central unit that says this is how you should do it, now we're taking basically the opposite approach and really pushing them to bring value in those units.
Yeah, so wrapping up what Clemens just introduced, we have these two different approaches, as said. We have directed design interventions. They give an impulse. They introduce a new language. They introduce an experience, how it is to work interdisciplinary with each other. As Clemens mentioned, for example, are the recurring hackathons, but there are also other projects, for example, worth to mention is the service design project, where interdisciplinary teams have been working for 2 months together, following a service design approach, going onto the field all together, interviewing the people together, coming back with these insights and assumptions, challenging those in prototypes, and iteratively developing a better service and product over time. So these are disruptive, right? And on the other hand, we have daily life, daily routines, daily practices, very different nature to these disruptive small interventions. This is emerging over time. You need to make sense collectively. You need to get everybody on board over time. And you need to figure out together, what does data, what does digitalization actually mean? And what does it mean to different stakeholders? So to navigate this ambiguity, there are a few examples we can mention, and they are really very different in their content. The first one is an example about iteration and proof of concept. 2 years ago, the word proof of concept didn't exist in the data-related issues within Sanoma, but through a framework about data experimentization, this word and the iterative approach became absolutely natural to anybody. Even though this framework hasn't been followed nitty-gritty in detail, but it introduced new concepts which have survived in daily life. Another topic is data democratization, where Sanoma or the data teams introduced data enablers in order to also get people on board who are not from a data background. There is one example introducing Microsoft Power BI, where editors nowadays can work with their own data and make estimations without always consulting an expert. And one of the grand challenges right now we are facing is cross-departmental planning, because everybody has a different approach and a different timeline. So this is a current challenge to adjust different ways of working also on a planning level.
So, bringing this to a conclusion, It's not very easy, but essentially it's a balancing act. So you need kind of both sides. You need directed interventions, and you need to focus on the emerging practices at the same time. You need central governance. For example, it's very important to get privacy right as a big organization like us, having data in so diverse practices. And that's a lot easier if you have central governance on that. But on the other hand, you need ownership. You need the units, the product teams to actually own the data, to build the products and build their competencies on their own. You need structure if you want to bring change about. You need some kind of a plan and direction. But you also need to improvise because things will eventually change, and you need plans to, adapt. And in the end, you need urgency because otherwise people will not understand that change is needed. But you also need patience, and a lot of patience, because change comes very slowly and things get very messy. But in the end, if you look back over a bit longer horizon, it does happen. So this was the end of our story, but it's actually just the beginning. And we would like to also hear from you. Normally, I would ask people to come back after the presentation, but in any virtual channels, please reach out to us, and yeah, we're happy to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting Clemens and Katharina. I know that Sanoma has been an organization that has gone a lot of different type of changes over the years, not only because of design and data, but also because of the business landscape has been so radically evolving. Mm-hmm. But I think the data has been playing some kind of a role also in the survival of Sanoma business all through the turbulent times and changing businesses. I know that the data the Sanoma was one of the first organizations in first corporations in Finland to really take very seriously the data science and its opportunities, and they built a very huge data science team probably almost 10 years ago already.
Yep.
Because it was on full speed and quite a big well-staffed about 6 years ago when I first learned about it. But how do you kind of looking back at the things now? I mean, now you've been presenting all kinds of instruments that you have and all kinds of like activities that have been taking place in the last couple of years. What is your kind of own approach? I mean, so I'd say that the kind of work of inducing design thinking inside the whole Sanoma. Of course, it's kind of there are very different kind of units inside Sanoma, so that they have their own kind of ways of working. But how do you say that has it been? How easy or fruitful has it been to kind of get this design type of mindset once people have been first kind of they already got the data part a little bit in advance, and now you've added the efforts to get them also to think designers.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of perspectives to this. So, as you said, Sanoma has actually a surprisingly long history with data and really started like full speed a while ago. And that has been a transformation on its own. But similar, actually, that happened with design. And there's been efforts like before us. Sanoma has been developing this big design framework a while back already that also dates like over 5 years back. And there's lots of efforts from all the units, but it's also a very democratic company, which sometimes also means slightly chaotic. And it means that you need to sort of leverage that grassroots movement from that's happening in all places and bring those voices together. And I see really that like this is sort of our part and our perspective now from the data side of view, where this might be a new approach, at least in Sanoma. But now we're basically at a stage where, as mentioned, we're trying to align within the whole company also these things. So also leveraging the people with that experience in, let's say, the B2B unit or B2C unit, or yeah.
In terms of, you mentioned that Sanoma is kind of democratic, and one sort of aspect into dealings with data, particularly, is the kind of democratic and open access for data. Mm-hmm. How do you kind of currently see, I mean, my kind of personal image from a few years back, of actually 2014, is I remember that Sanoma at that time had a big data science unit, and they were building all kind of dashboards to at least give out some amount of the data. But what is the current situation? How well do you think the data archives that you have are? How well accessible are they for an average person in the company?
That's always a matter of perspective, I would say, because I think much of the things are quite forward-looking. As mentioned, Power BI is a tool that sort of nicely helped also kind of making a strong statement that now this is sort of the tool that is the go-to solution, and we're just going to bring all the data into that, and then you can kind of build on that, and you know. But then again, like when you reach something, then you know that already looks like, oh, it's nothing. I don't know if that makes sense, but quite often you get to a point like when you look back 6 months, that's, you know, a crazy achievement. But you can, if you're in that, already see that, well, you know, this is still so wrong, and we could improve this so much, and you can see it in sort of the maturing of the organization, that the more we provide, the more also, for example, we empower the journalists to build their own dashboards, and the more the complexity raises in there as well. Like we used to just have, you know, sessions or clicks or, you know, into articles, and that was like the metric, and everybody was like, cool. But nowadays the complexity has gone up so much. We track all kinds of different metrics. Engagement, we try to even like you know, predict engagement. Like there's all these perspectives, and people are involved from all these units in those discussions. And of course, that again then raises sort of the expectation to the level of self-service. So people, of course, expect now more, and also expect to ask even deeper questions. And then we need to up our game again. That
probably also kind of requires or involves more and more kind of domain expertise from the people who are working with the data, which is something that you as data science experts have to learn from them.
Exactly.
Well.
Yeah.
Good. Now I have to thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time at this moment for questions, but thank you so much for coming, Clemens and Katharina.
Thanks.
Thank you.